before jumping into the Duskbloods network test, my biggest question going in was, what type of game is this? Is it a extraction type of game like Arc Raiders or Escape from Tarkov? Is it a battle royale, something like Fortnite or Warzone? Or is it something like Elden Ring Night Rain, where you co-op against bigger bosses and, it's just a basic spin-off of everything we know from Fromsoftware's gameplay style? And luckily, after playing a few rounds of the Duskbloods, all those questions have been answered. Now, Duskbloods is essentially a PvP game where you sometimes can co-op bigger kind of baddies around the map, essentially. It is you and 8 players that jump into a match and essentially have to hunt down all these kinds of enemies around the map and hunt down each other at the same time. Now, you don't have to necessarily hunt down other players really until the end of the match, but, you can definitely run into players in the middle of a match when you're hunting down, NPC enemies like the one you're looking on your screen right now. So basically, the way a match goes is you obviously pick the character that you want to play as. Each character has a different set of skills and different weapons. And, you basically just find the play style that you want to play as and choose the character going into the match. Now, once you choose the character, like I said, it's 8 people. So you and 7 others are loading onto a map where there are a bunch of enemies scattered around. And basically your goal is to gather what they call, I guess, blood virtue. And they're essentially just like points for basically doing things around the map, like fighting enemies or finding them in unique locations, or doing certain challenges like fighting a big boss, things like that. Now, as you gain these blood virtue points, there is a countdown to essentially the next day or phase. There are 4 phases within an actual round. Now, on the first phase, you're basically just kind of worried about going around and fighting enemies and finding these blood virtue points in these unique locations. And it's counting down to the next phase. When the next phase begins, they are introduced to what they call these blood pledge ritual sites. They kind of look like Michaela's Cross from the Elden Ring DLC. And essentially, if you go there and you pledge yourself to these ritual sites, you're granted a big amount of these blood virtue points that you have to gain. Now, the only problem with that is they are marked on the map for other players to see. So when you are trying to get these blood virtue points from these pledges, so are the other people that are on the map. And, if they are good at what they're doing, they are essentially going to go and try to kill you for those blood pledge points that you are getting and are trying to, earn and get and defend and whatnot. Now, as you're getting all these things, there are also other elements like kind of spirit summons from Elden Ring, which is this giant kind of, rune kind of tower thing that you're looking at here on the right hand side. When you interact with it, it actually gives you basically a spirit summon like in Elden Ring, and it gives you somebody that's going to help you out throughout the entire match that can also be upgraded by finding things around the map. Now, I know it sounds like I'm kind of, overwhelming you all with a lot of information, and that's because that's exactly how it felt whenever you originally jump into a match and are kind of given all this information in the tutorial and whatnot. But it is kind of very overwhelming at first, and that's just kind of how it feels because there's so many systems happening, on this game. With that being said, though, let's go back to that day 2 phase that I was talking about. So you're going around trying to get these blood virtue points, either at these ritual sites or fighting enemies or finding them around unique locations of the map. And like I said, so are other people doing the same thing. Whether or not they choose to fight them or they choose to fight you or you choose to fight them, it's totally up to you and that other player. So you basically got to stay on your toes and, stay vigilant. Because they can attack you at any time, and once they attack you, they can steal your blood virtue points or gain blood virtue points from killing you, or just kind of stop you in your kind of quest to get those blood virtue points and kind of waste your time so that you're left with less amount than everybody else at the end of the round. So that gets me to my next point. Basically, your goal is to have as much blood virtue points as anybody else on your in the match with you. Anybody who's at the bottom of the leaderboards in terms of blood virtue points at the end of each round is essentially kicked from the match, and you lost. That's it. At the end of every phase, 1 or 2 people are always selected. I don't remember exactly how the order goes. I think it's 1 person the first day, 2 people the second day, and then 2 people the third day as well. I'm not entirely sure, but it was kind of hard, like I said, to keep track with everything because there was a lot going on during the network test. But yeah, basically, you do day 2 to the end. Let's say that you did get a lot of blood virtue and you make it to the third round. The third round is essentially the same thing. However, there are bosses that spawn on the map as well. Now, these bosses spawn in day 2, but in day 3, they spawn a lot more stronger and frequent. Now, I keep saying day 1 and day 2, but these things are actually brought out in separated by phases. I keep saying day 1 and day 2 because of Night Rain, because that's how the phases were separated in that game. But in this game, it's separated by phases. It's not separated by days. So I got to get out of the habit of saying that. But yeah. With that being said, yes, so phase 3 comes in. There's harder bosses, there's ritual sites on the map, and you can kind of choose what you want to do. Now, the game kind of points you into doing co-op at the beginning of the phase and then doing the ritual sites at the end of the phase. At least that's the way that I interpreted it whenever phases would start, because the ritual sites wouldn't get established until kind of towards the end of the round, which means you couldn't pledge to them and get those blood virtue points until towards the end of the round. Yeah, so let's say that you go through phase 3 and get all those blood virtue points, and you actually end up coming out victorious at the end of phase 3 with the highest amount of blood virtue points. Essentially, the top 3 performers and the top 3 earners of blood virtue points get teleported to phase 4, or the final phase, which is essentially just a PvP free-for-all at a certain point of the map, which is typically like a peak of the map, like a rooftop, or a certain point of the map where there's really nowhere else to go except into each other's skulls. So yeah, you basically just PvP each other at the end of the match, and whoever wins that free-for-all is the winner. Now, I will say, when you get into that final phase, each person has 2 lives plus their kin. So, or that's what they call their spirits of in the kin. So if you get to the final match, you and your kin homeboy are essentially tasked with fighting everybody else, and whoever wins that match wins the actual game. And there you have it. There's a match of the Duskbloods from phase 1 to gathering all the, fighting all the enemies, gathering as much blood virtue, to phase 2, gathering those ritual sites, fighting bosses where you can request people to co-op with you if you want. Then phase 3, harder bosses, more ritual sites, and then towards the end at the final phase, or phase 4, where you free for all and fight. And at that point, you've leveled up and you have all your skills and whatnot unlocked, and you're kind of oiled up, a well-oiled machine by the time you get to the final phase, where you can fight everybody and it just turns into pure chaos. So that's essentially what a match of the Duskbloods is like. If it sounds overwhelming or if it sounds confusing, that's because at the first time you do it, it absolutely is. When I jumped into it, I'm not going to lie, I was really not having, a great time, just because there was just so many systems getting introduced and so much just getting fed to you that it was very, very overwhelming. It was very kind of hard to kind of gauge, what was going on. And then once you would actually get into fights, it was very just straight chaos. Like it was very crazy, all the movement, all the effects from people's skills and all that stuff is pretty crazy. Now, I do want to get into a little bit more of a deep dive as to what my thoughts are on the game and what my gripes are, because I do have, a couple of gripes with the game, a couple of complaints. But I'm going to make those in a separate video because I do want them to be separated. I just kind of wanted to use this video to give you guys an idea of what a match plays out like, and, let you guys make the informed decision as to whether or not you want to try it out, or if this is kind of the type of game that you want. Rest assured, though, like I said, I am going to be giving you guys my thoughts later on, just, how I felt about the game, how it plays, how it runs, all that stuff. So be on the lookout for that. This gameplay that you're looking at right now is from Oroboro. He is a YouTuber that essentially got the chance to play the game early and preview it before the network test actually came out. And this is his raw just kind of footage that Fromsoftware provided him with. I don't think this is his raw gameplay footage. I'm not entirely sure on that. But shout out to Oroboro. He's a very, very good YouTuber and Souls content creator as well. But anyways, man, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Just wanted to give you the idea of what this game is, and I will see you all later. Peace.